All right. Give everybody a couple minutes to get in here. Or you might pop it up on your computer and see if you can hear the sound all right. Do you have the link?
No.
It's on Twitter or Facebook.
Thinking about live streaming. Hello? You should say hello.
Yeah, it's going to take a second. It's got a little bit of a delay. But see if you can hear the sound all right. I'm a little bit of a low talker, so.
Hello? Oh yeah, I should say hello.
Yeah, it's going to take a second. It's got a little bit of a delay. But see if you can hear the sound all right. Did it match up with my lips at all?
No.
No, it's like way off.
About a word off.
Oh, yeah, that's the webcam. I'll have to get a better one. Okay. So I guess we'll just start, and if people join in, we'll just catch them back up. Okay, so welcome guys to the first ever Madness Cast. We're going to try to do these on a more regular basis, probably trying to do maybe once, twice a week, to just do some building live. And unlike our YouTube videos where we kind of take some time to cut things down and make it just a smooth run through in like 10 to 20 minutes, this one's going to be a little bit different. This is going to give us a lot of availability to kind of show you our process. There's going to be Googling, there's going to be discussion of what we want to do next, where we want to go, debugging and stuff like that usually doesn't make it into the YouTube videos. We don't usually use a script when we're doing our videos. However, we might start in the future, but these are really great for just an unscripted session to be able to just code and see how it's actually done, see how we actually do our work. I'm Bobby, if you don't know me already from the YouTube videos. And if you're just getting into web development and this is your first time coding or getting into coding, I have a link in the description under resources for doing basically like setting up your environment with Node and TypeScript, all of which will be required for you to actually follow along inside of this video. So not a whole lot of people watching live right now, as we just posted out the links, but I figured it'd be good to just get the intro out of the way for the people that are watching at home. So the first big thing I guess that we have is, again, you can see it on the screen here, support us on Patreon. We're going to be trying this year to really focus on developer learning resources. So for those of you who don't know us, I am Bobby, and my wife in the background is Emily, and I'm the developer here at Madness Labs, and she is the designer, UX UI designer, developer at Madness Labs, and basically we are a two-man team of awesome, and we work with some contractors and stuff all over the United States. And we focus mainly on business management tools, apps, websites. We also have a software as a service for some smaller business clients that we work with. So we do a little bit of everything. And then this last year, we taught a class up in St. Louis for underprivileged youth, where we taught web design and development. And basically, we want to take our knowledge and the things that we've learned in creating a really great process for working with clients and building apps. And we want to kind of share that with you with these live casts, as well as some other learning resources. So if you head on over to our Patreon, which the link is on the screen, or you can actually go into the description and you'll find it down there. And you can actually head on over to our Patreon and support us, because we are going to be trying to scale up a set of Skillshare courses, as well as some free learning resources here on YouTube. And we're going to try to add more and more production quality and stuff as we get funding and as we get more and more time to devote to this project. But again, just starting here with the live cast, probably once a week, maybe throttling up to twice a week by the end of the month, or well, by the end of next month. Maybe come over and say hi.
Hello.
So that's Emily. She's the UI UX lead designer, co-founder of Madness Labs. And she is going to be doing all the wonderful designing for the Madness Labs website. So again, please support us on Patreon. We're trying to really scale up these resources, and it doesn't, the stuff doesn't come for free. all the knowledge that we've put into this in time. And as a bonus, anyone who signs up today and donates $10 or more, we're going to give you a free t-shirt, a Madness Labs t-shirt, not like the lame ass one in our Patreon banner, but a legit, really sparkling looking awesome one. And if you donate more than $50 on our Patreon, we'll give you a personalized piece of swag with your name on it. That way you can be part of the Mad Swag crew. So that being said, I'm going to jump right into it now. So here we have VS Code. So if you don't have VS Code, you should totally get it because it's the greatest thing for developers since sliced bread. And what we're going to do first is we're just going to clone down the project, and we're going to be using Ionic PWA. So this is something, and they actually literally like 5 minutes before the cast released an update. So we're going to try to use the latest version. Hopefully it doesn't break anything. So first off, I'm going to head on over to github.com. And again, if you've never developed before, GitHub is a wonderful resource to store all of your code, and then that way you can share it with other people or sync it down, or it's also a really great place. Like I've been starring a lot of repos and stuff like that just to keep tabs on different coding stuff that's been going on. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new repository, and I'm going to do it underneath Madness Labs. And we're going to go ahead and call this Madness Labs PWA, and we're going to make it public. The new website / PWA for Madness Labs. Okay, so I'm gonna leave this uninitialized. We're gonna have it like completely blank, and that way we can actually use the command line tool that we've made called Madness Engine. We're gonna use that to actually clone down Ionic's PWA, and then we're going to then sync it up to this GitHub repository, and we're gonna do it all with one command, which is pretty sweet. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to go ahead and jump on over to Ionic team, and we're going to jump into say hello to our viewers. So now we're going to go ahead and jump into Ionic PWA toolkit. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually grab this Ionic team Ionic PWA toolkit. I'm going to grab that right from the URL. And what's cool is our MadnessEnjinCLI tool, it automatically like basically fills in the github.com when it's cloning a repo. So that way we don't have to go about doing that. Okay, so now I'm back in VS Code and I'm in my apps directory on my computer. And this is where we're going to start running our commands. So we're going to say engine start. And then we're going to put in the link to the GitHub repository that we're going to be cloning from. And then we're going to put in the name of the folder on our local machine, Madness Labs PWA. Okay, so again, if you haven't checked out the video in the description, then basically we go through how to install the MadnessEnjinCLI tool. It's actually fairly simple. It's just npm install -g MadnessEngine, and it'll install this little engine command for you to actually utilize on your machine. So again, this is the engine start command. So we're going to do engine start, the name of the repository that we're cloning down to our machine, and then the name of the folder that we're actually cloning that project into. And then I'm going to pass in a couple flags. So I'm going to pass in a -e flag, which is for editor, and then we can actually type in code-insiders. And what that's going to do is when the project is finished cloning and installing, it's then going to open up the editor that we pass into the editor flag. So if you're using regular code, as you can see, my code icon is green. That's because I'm on Code Insiders, so that's why I have Code Insiders on the -e. But if you're just using regular VS Code, it'll just be -e code. So I'm going to do Code Insiders, and then we're going to do -r, and -r is the repository that we want, or the remote that we want to connect this repository to. So in this case, I want it to connect to Madness Labs / Madness Labs PWA. So remember, that's the GitHub repository that I just created over on GitHub. So Okay. Come on, fingers, you can do it. So again, we have an empty repository here. It's waiting to be started. And the cool thing is this is going to kind of do most of the work for us. So one more time, run through it. Engine start, and the start command is what clones down a repo. So we're going to clone down Ionic team, Ionic PWA toolkit. We're going to clone it to a folder on our computer called Madness Labs PWA. We're going to then open it with the editor code insiders, and then we're going to link it to the remote Madness Labs / Madness Labs PWA. So in that one command, we're going to get a whole lot of awesome all at once. So right now it's cloning down the repo, then it CDs into the directory, edits the name of your application to whatever you typed in right here, this Madness Labs PWA. Then it's going to go about running the NPM install, opening it up in VS Code, and then you can see there it's actually gone about connecting up our remote. So now we can actually go into our Git Changes panel, and we can actually see all of the changes that are ready to be committed. And again, what's really cool is we're already connected to our GitHub repository. So as soon as we make this commit, it'll actually sync that code up to GitHub. So if you've never initialized a GitHub repo and done all that stuff, this kind of takes all that stuff out of the equation so that you can just kind of focus in on what you want to get done. So cool, I've got my project cloned down, and I'm just going to put initial commit. So again, if you're new to coding, this is the Git Changes panel, this little fork looking thing down here with the numbers on it. This tells you the changes that you've made in your project and these changes that are ready to be synced to GitHub or wherever you're storing your Git repository. So I'm going to put initial commit. That's usually just a standard default message for when you're starting a new project. And then basically this comment field is just something to say what you did inside of this commit. And a commit is just a batch of changes. So in this initial commit, it has pretty much all the code for my entire project. So I'm going to press Control Enter, or I can click that little checkbox right there, and it's going to then commit those changes. So now down here, you'll see that this new button popped up at the bottom, and it says Madness Labs PWA Toolkit Publish Changes. So what that button does, I call it the syncy button, and it goes about syncing your changes. So after you commit your changes, you then have to synchronize them with whatever remote servers that you're connected to. So now that I've synchronized my changes to GitHub, now what I should see, I can close this guy down. So now I can refresh my page over here, and you'll see that my changes are now on GitHub. So I've got the Ionic PWA toolkit already cloned, installed, and pushed up to my GitHub repository, and it's all done within the first couple minutes. So awesome sauce, right? We've got our application ready, and now we're actually ready to pop it open and start playing with it. So, and if you already know what you're doing, if you're that one lonely guy that's watching right now that already knows what he's doing, then this is where things are going to get interesting. Okay, so I'm going to press Control tilde, and that's going to open up the integrated terminal. You also can go up to View and then Integrated Terminal here, and you can see all of the nice keyboard shortcuts labeled on the menu items. Thank you, VS Code. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to run NPM Start. So NPM Start, again, I'm gonna be handling this as if you know absolutely nothing. So NPM Start reads this package file, reads this package.json, and when we run start, it runs whatever I have inside of this start section under scripts. So in this case, it's going to npm run dev, and npm run dev is going to run the dev command underneath scripts, and it's going to run this. And so again, if you've never developed before, this is all like complete gibberish. But basically what this is doing is it's starting a live server, it's building the project, the Stencil project, and then it's starting a dev server and watching for changes. So this is, again, these are really, really helpful. So if you're just getting started, probably won't utilize these too much. But as you kind of grow with this process, and maybe as you watch through these casts, we'll start setting up some extra custom commands like deploy and things like that, where we'll deploy them to some kind of service like Firebase. But that's what's going on under the hood. So now let's go ahead and put this guy right next to our application so we can see that. Okay, cool. So now that I've started it, you can see that it runs the build process and then it opens the application in the browser. And again, this is the Ionic PWA toolkit. So what this is Ionic, as many of you may know, is an Angular framework that that basically lets you build applications that work on web as well as on mobile using Cordova. So super great. However, one of the big problems is that there's a lot more frameworks other than just Angular. There is React, there is Vue, there's all these different options, and then there's a lot of purists that are starting to write more JavaScript applications just because now the standards are actually being supported so well that it makes a lot more sense to actually build a full JavaScript solution. So that's when the great people at Ionic released Stencil. And Stencil is basically a tool that helps you build web components. So again, web components are just little tiny pieces of code that you assemble together into your overall application, and they're standard on all browsers now. They're compliant on everything except for Old Internet Explorer. But on everything else, it works great. And then what they went ahead and did was they built out the Ionic Core, which is just all the pieces from Ionic. So for instance, you can see we have the header bar here, we have the profile, or we have the buttons, we have all the pieces of Ionic without Angular. And you can still get in the new Ionic 4, they'll still be using Angular. They'll still be using Angular in order to make your applications and stuff like that. However, all the pieces are going to be built with Stencil components and web components. And this allows people to use Ionic, the user interface pieces, with React and with any other kind of solution. And there's already tons of resources. Again, I've got some links in the description to go over to Stencil's website to check out how to get started with them, as well as some resources for the MadnessEnjinCLI that we'll be using here. Awesome. So here's the folder structure. So if you go into the source directory, you'll see that we have a couple folders. We have the assets, which are kind of like the pieces that you're going to be using inside of the application. So for instance, like your images, your favicon, your fonts, stuff like that you're going to actually be using in the public directory. And then we've got components, which these are all the little components. So for instance, you can see the home component, and each web component is going to be in its own folder. So this is going to be a little different for people like for myself. When I first started working in like React, this paradigm shift was a little bit difficult for me at first, just because traditionally we're kind of used to like building an application and having a folder full of CSS files, a folder full of HTML files, a folder full of this. And what kind of happens is that you end up getting a ton of files, and then you're trying to find each piece, and it gets very difficult to manage the larger a project gets. And so web components aim to solve that by doing two kind of unique things. One being the way that you structure it is you kind of structure it in smaller pieces. So each, as you can see here, each page is a component, and then there's even pieces of the pages that are stored in their own folders under components. And then their CSS, SCSS in this case, TSX and spec are all stored in one folder. And that way you don't have to go running around to find all of the functionality for your component. It's all kind of compartmentalized right here in a folder. So as you can see, this is the home page that we're actually viewing here on the right. I'll shrink down my terminal a little bit. So this is the home page that we're viewing over here. So you can see we're doing it just like we would if we were actually building an Ionic application. We have Ion page, and we have our Ion header, and then our Ion toolbar, and then our Ion content, and then we have our Ion button. So one thing you'll notice here is that we have a stencil router link, or a stencil route link, sorry. And this is something different because remember, you're not building with Angular, you're building with Stencil, and Stencil isn't requiring you to use any kind of a framework. So they were nice enough to build this a stencil router, and the stencil router handles the use of URLs like this, profile/stencil. It handles all of that stuff without the need for a framework. However, if you're building inside of Ionic 4 in the near future here, or if you're building inside of something that does have its own routing, then you can just leave out this package altogether and you won't use these stencil routes. So I'll pause briefly here. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask in the live chat. I'll try to keep my eye on that every now and then and pop over and look at it. I tend to move a little fast sometimes. Or if you just like maybe miss something or need me to go back. Again, these casts are supposed to be more about kind of seeing the raw process that we go through and getting to a chance to ask questions and stuff like that and see me look like an idiot as I debug things and make spelling errors. So yeah, I mean, feel free to ask any kind of questions or anything you might have, and I will do my best to address them as quickly as possible. So, and again, I've got to be that guy. Please support us on Patreon. Again, anyone who signs up today is going to get, and anyone who signs up today is going to, and spends $10 or more, they're going to get a Madness Labs t-shirt. And if you do $50 or more, we're going to actually throw in your name on the back of it. Customized t-shirt, Madness swag, exclusive stuff, guys. Okay, so let's get into the nitty gritty here. Let's actually start putting components on our screen, or let's create a component. So we could go about copying and pasting this folder and renaming a bunch of different files and stuff like that. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the engine command line tool. So I'm going to kill my build here, and I'm going to use the engine command line tool to create a component. Engine AC for add component, and then I'm going to do, let's call it app-apps. Okay, cool. So now what you can see is I ran engine AC app-apps, and then it created an app-apps folder with an app-apps CSS file, an app-apps spec file, and then an app-apps TSX file. So what this does, this AC command, is add component. Again, link in the description if you want to read into the MadnessEnjinCLI. But basically, it just makes it a little easier to add components or remove components from your project. The engine is not anything that's specifically made for Stencil, but it does help kind of ease some of the processes that you do inside of a Stencil application. So cool, I've got my new component, and all I have to do to wire this up and make it work is I've got to basically just slap it onto the screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this because this is a page. I'm going to add this under my app, and we can see here that in the my app component, we have under the render function, we have these stencil router, and then each route underneath here. This is kind of what controls the actual routes inside of the application. So if I wanted to add a new page for /apps, for instance, I'm going to actually copy this route here. I'm going to paste this. I'm going to say /apps. And then the component I'm going to load in is going to be app-apps. And we can take this exact off because we don't need it to be exactly right. Awesome. And now when I save that, oh yeah, sorry, I need to run my NPM Start again. So something to note, when you run the engine AC command, it kills the it kills the build process for Stencil. So it's something that we're going to be working on here shortly and probably one of the future updates. But as of right now, just kill the process if you're going to add a component, and then you start it right up when you're done. Okay, cool. So now I've got it running again, and then I'm going to run /apps. And now you can see it says your new app-apps component. So now I've hooked up a new route. So this route /apps is going to load this component. And then under here in app-apps, we can see that now we have your new app-apps component loading onto the screen. So if I want to make this look a little bit more like the others, I could maybe copy all of this stuff inside the render function. And I'm going to paste it in here and say, maybe in the title, apps welcome to our apps page. And we'll take them back to the home page. Awesome. Then once we save and it reloads, now you can see we have our apps title bar. We've got a home page button, and I click it and it takes me back home. Awesome. So now you've kind of seen how to hook up a route. So we've added a new component called apps. This is going to be a page in this case. And then I've gone about and taken that and I've actually hooked it up to our router so that it knows when I visit /apps, it's going to take me to the apps page and load the apps component. And then we've actually added in some basic content into our apps component. So now I guess I'll walk through a little bit more about the actual Stencil, the Stencil build process here. So what you may have noticed in these files here is that we always have an import at the top that imports things from the Stencil core. And then we have an component, and then an export of a class, and then this render function. So to break these down one by one, so the import goes about importing things that we need. In this case, we have a decorator for component, and we also have a prop, which you can see here that we are declaring it and we never use it. We'll get to that here in a minute. And we're importing this from @Stencil Core. And Stencil Core, again, what's really brilliant about Stencil is that Stencil is meant to be something that you kind of opt into, and it compiles out, which means that, like, unlike React or Angular or something like that, we don't have any access to something called Stencil in the browser. So traditionally in an Angular project you type in Angular and you get some kind of an output. But here we don't have Stencil or StencilJS, because what's happening is this is just a compiler. It compiles out to straight vanilla JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So we're writing TSX, a slightly modified version of TypeScript, and we're writing SCSS, which is a precompiled style language. And it's compiling it all and serving it up in just plain JavaScript. And we can actually see this if we jump into our build directory. We can see we just have an app.js and index.html, and it's just loading these JavaScript and CSS files. It's not actually using any of this code that we're typing inside of our source directory. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the import section of this. And then once we import the component, they use @decorators. Or decorators as they're called. You might be familiar with this if you've written an Angular 2 application or an Ionic 2, 3, 4, whatever they're on now, application, or even some React projects have started to pick up this @ sign as well. I think it's going to become a standard thing here in the near future. But basically, this just gives some extra details about a property or a class or function. It just gives some kind of details to the compiler to let it know what it needs to do with this class. So in this case, this is a component. This class is going to be a component. It's going to have a tag of apps, and then it's going to have a style URL of app-apps.css. And you'll note that that's the name of our style sheet file here. So this just basically tells this that when this compiles, you're going to be targeting this tag with this style sheet when utilizing this class. So again, should be fairly simple and fairly common if you've worked inside of Angular 2 or something like that. So yeah, I mean, nothing super crazy there. And you're going to have these on every single one of your components. It's just kind of the basic layout of a component. Then we're exporting a class, and your class is always named after the component without any dashes, using, it's not camel case, I can't remember the name for all caps on all of your different words, but it's using that. And then inside of here we have a render function. So if you've never worked inside of React, this is probably kind of strange to you. It's kind of different and foreign, but basically the render function just renders content onto the screen. So when the component loads up, this is what it's going to show onto the screen. And you can see that we're typing HTML inside of here, which is kind of strange because, one of the big things, like when I first started getting React, this was one of the things that really threw me off because I'm used to writing my HTML in HTML files or like a pug file, and then I've got my styles in their own file, and then I've got my JavaScript in its own file. And this kind of mucks them all up together, but it actually, because of the way that you write components and because of the way that they're so small, it actually makes a lot of sense to just bake in the functionality. And then the general rule of thumb is if you hit like 100 lines inside of a component, you probably need to start refactoring your component into smaller components and assembling them together, because you're probably trying to do too much. And that's just kind of the general practice. So again, this render method automatically gets fired when the component is rendered, and it's always going to return something. And then we're going to write HTML inside of here, and then we can even write JavaScript inside of here as well. It's a modified syntax. It's actually using something called hyperscript. I've got another YouTube video on hyperscript if you jump over to our Madness Labs channel. But basically, again, it's just a mix of HTML and JavaScript, writing them all in line with each other, which again feels a little weird at first, but once you start making components, it becomes so much simpler to wrap your head around this stuff this way. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist, and that's actually why we have these TSX as the main component files here, is because it's using TypeScript. It's using TypeScript, a modified version of TypeScript that uses this JSX in order to allow us to write JavaScript HTML inside of our JavaScript. Awesome. So now we've got Pascal case. Oh, thank you. Look at that. Emily's got my back here. She's air checking my stuff. She's Googling. I like this. Got a little command center going. So if you're just joining us again, we're building today a PWA for MadnessLabs.net, our current website, which looks pretty shabby, not gonna lie. We built this website, oh my goodness, years and years ago, back when I was still working full-time somewhere, and Emily was working full-time somewhere, and we just threw this together as quickly as we could. So this is our current website. This is what we're trying to replace today. And basically, we've just got a couple pages. We've got an apps page, an about page, a blog, and then every freaking social network you can imagine. And we're just going to be replacing this with a PWA. As much as we love this solution that we've already got, and this 2-year-old theme that we rocked all the way through an entire year, we were like the hillbillies that never took down their Christmas lights on the web sphere. So yeah, this is what we're replacing today. So as we go along here, I'm going to be kind of just explaining away at every little piece of this process. I'm also going to probably be Googling and breaking a lot of stuff and debugging it, and hopefully this is helpful. And if you have any questions about PWAs or Stencil or Ionic or just web development in general, please feel free to post a comment over there, and I will get back to it, or Emily will snipe it from behind me without me even knowing. And we'll just kind of address these things as they come in. And then again, I'll ask that if you guys enjoy this, please head on over to Patreon, support us on there, because we're going to try to put more and more of these resources out there this year. We're going to try to make this a regular habit, doing this maybe once, twice a week. From here on out, working on some cool projects like Madness Labs, Anna Madness, Madness Chat, just different little small applications that we really haven't been making the time for over the years. But now we're going to try to use this as an opportunity to teach people, and kind of give people an opportunity to kind of experiment in web development, or if you're already in web development, give you a little bit of a boost in running through some of these new things that are coming out. Okay, so again, we've got a Ionic application scaled. We've got it synced to our GitHub, and now we're running it inside of the browser, and we have an apps page that we created, an apps component, and we're loading that into. Okay, guys, sorry about that. The stream dropped there for a second. Hopefully you guys are still with me. Come on, you can do it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to recreate something like this. Like we want on our page, we want to list out all the different apps that we've worked on. And so let's just start out really, really simply. We're going to go in here and we're going to, let's just make a simple div maybe. And we'll give it an idea of like app. Oh no, let's give it a class. App. Okay, so in here, I'm gonna do maybe an image. It's gonna be the app's image. I'm gonna do an h2, and this is gonna have the app name, and then maybe a paragraph. Awesome. Okay, so now I've gone and just added a div that's going to have some just empty content here. And maybe I want to actually go about putting an image in here. So I'm going to actually just cheat here, and I'm going to right click and copy image link. Okay, so I'm going to just use the link that we have on our live server here. That way I don't have to mess with any resources. Okay, so now you can see that we've got a very hideous looking application loaded on the screen here. And now what I probably want to do is I probably want to have one of these for each app that we're going to pass in. So we're probably not going to bake the data directly into the page. You know, we're not going to, I don't personally want to write, I don't want to have to come back and edit this page 100 times when I add a new app. Instead, I'm going to probably have some kind of database or some kind of data source that I'm going to use in order to like load this information in. So I'm going to go ahead and make that. So I'm going to import a new module here. I'm going to go ahead and do state. And so what state is state is going to allow us to create a property that when it's updated, it will force a render to occur. So I'm going to do state apps, and I'm going to say this is going to be any. And that just means, again, if you've never done TypeScript, what we're doing here is we're going to use our add decorator for state, which we just imported up here. And then we're going to make a property on our class called apps. And then that apps is going to be any. And actually, I'm going to do it right. Okay, I'll do it right, guys. Jeez. Okay, so I'm going to have apps, and each app is going to have an image, or well, let's call it a logo. No, let's call it icon. Each app's going to have an icon. It's going to be a string. It's going to have a title, which is going to be a string, and then it's going to have a description. Yes, which is also going to be a string. So again, this is TypeScript. So if you've never used TypeScript, this is a little new to you, but basically, if you've written JavaScript before, you probably didn't have to do anything like this. And that's because JavaScript is a dynamically typed language. So it doesn't care. Like I could just define any variable I want and use it. It doesn't care. TypeScript is very picky. It adds what's called static typing. And static typing means that we have to define every variable and tell it what to expect before we're even allowed to use it. So our code won't even compile if we don't have these typings correct. So for instance, down here, if I try to, maybe I make a new thing called test, and I say it's a string. If I try to, inside this return, say test equals 1, 2, 3, it's going to give me a red thing because it says, hey, 1, 2, 3 is not assignable to type it, which is weird. So it's telling us that, hey, you can't assign that to a string, or you can't assign a number to a string. Oh yeah, that's right. That's why this dot test. So you can see we have this test equals number. When I say this test equals 1, 2, 3, everything's all good. But if I change this to string, it's now going to be a red underline. It's going to give us a thing that says, hey, type 1, 2, 3 is not assignable to type string. So it's going to protect us, and it won't actually even compile this code until we have these typings correct. And a cheater's way of doing it is putting any on everything. But then you're screwing yourself, because you're eventually going to come back. You're gonna assign some crazy variable with some other value that you didn't expect, and then something's gonna break in the browser, which is not where you want it to break. You want it to break here when you're compiling the code. You want to see that output inside of the console, and that way you don't have to wait until your users experience that problem to let you know. So cool. I've got a state item called apps, and it's going to be an array of objects, and each object is going to be required to have an icon, a title, and a description. So I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to set this equal to my array. And again, usually you won't do this. Actually, let's do it inside of the component will load. So let me pause for a drink break. Say hello to the viewers. Okay, so I'm going to use what's called component will load. So Stencil has a bunch of these. Again, link, description. So we can go to StencilJS.com, and if you go here, you can see that they've got some docs, and we can go in here and we can read about all of the different events. Component lifecycle. Yeah, here we go. So basically what these are just different things. These are different methods, just like our render runs automatically every time the component is rendered. This component will load will render, or this component will load method will be run whenever the component is about to load. There's also component did load, which happens right after the component has loaded. So it's just kind of like, it's kind of like whenever it makes sense to use this and that. Again, link in the description if you want to link to Stencil's website where they explain these things in greater detail. There's also component did update, component did unload, component did load, all that good stuff. So I'm going to use the component will load, and I'm going to set this dot apps equal to an array. And then I'm going to set it to an object. All right, I'm going to put an object inside of our array. Awesome sauceum. So again, I need an icon, and I'm going to use the icon from down here. Let's grab this whole thing. Okay, there's my icon. Then I'm going to need a title for a flood, and I'm going to need a description. This is the referral app for the flood team, water remediation company. Okay, cool. So now we've got our this.apps. We've got set to an array of data that we're going to have. Again, most likely you're going to have this data piped in via a call. You know, you're going to make an AJAX request to an API of some sort, or it's going to be passed in as a prop. But in this case, we're just going to set it manually here, just so that we can actually show a loop. So what we're going to want to do now is we're going to want to use some of the JavaScript inside of our return function, inside of our render function. And so this is where this kind of meshing of HTML and JavaScript comes in. So in Stencil, in order to start using your JavaScript stuff, you just put a pair of curlies. And then in here, we can use any kind of JavaScript that you want. So you can do any kind of for loop or set a variable or whatever you want. In this case, we're going to use some ES6 magicness, and we're going to do this.apps.map. And so if you're unfamiliar with map, it's basically like a for each or a for loop. It goes over an array, and for each one of those things, it runs whatever I put inside of the function or the callback. So in this case, each run of or each item inside of the array, each object, I'm going to make an app. And then I'm going to use my fat arrow. And a fat arrow just is a self-binding function. It allows us to use this inside of our function, and it maintains the this of the entire class rather than this of this iteration of the map, if that makes sense. Okay, cool. So now inside of here again, because I'm using my fat arrow, and actually I'm going to get rid of my curlies here. I'll make it even easier. Because I'm using my fat arrow and I don't have any curlies, automatically when you don't use any curlies or anything like that, it's considered a return. So it's going to return whatever's inside of here. So I can just take my lump of HTML that I have for each app, and I'm going to paste it inside of here. And then I'm going to go and make this correct. Okay, so then I'm going to use my set of curlies again, this time as the value of an attribute. So as well as using those curlies in order to just kind of do loops and things like that, you can also use them to set values of things. So in this case, I'm going to say app.icon, and then inside of my h2 here, which got all garbled for some reason, I'm going to say app.title, and then my paragraph tag, I'm going to say app.description. Awesome. Now when I save this, we should see just about the same result, except we're going to see the different title and description that we set. Awesome. So that's what we wanted to see. We've got basically a loop going now for each item inside of our apps, and it's going to put the icon inside of the image source. It's going to put the title inside of the h2 tag, and then it's going to put the description inside of the paragraph tag. And just to show you that this is working, we can add another bit of data here. Maybe I'm going to add the second item here, transition methods. Wonderful technical recruiter here in St. Louis. Copy image address. Going to paste this guy here. And I'm going to say transition methods. I'll just copy my text off here because I'm lazy. Awesome. What did I break? What did I break? I don't think I broke anything. Awesome. So now you can see that I've added a new object inside of my apps array, and it is now looping through and putting that on the page as well. So now maybe is a good time to style these guys up a little bit and make them look not so hideous. So to do that, I will go into, why do you hate me? State apps. I'm not gonna lie, that looks fine. Types, property, length are incompatible. Type 2 is not assignable to type 1. Yeah, as you can see, I am not the greatest at typings myself, but I thought that should work. I don't know. Okay, so now we've got that guy all hooked up. Let's go ahead and open up our SCSS file, and let's write some styles here. So if you've never written SCSS, or if you've never written CSS for that matter, CSS generally works in this way. So we have this component again, remember, is app-apps. So each one of these components gets a tag name of whatever we name the component. So in this case, app-apps is going to be a tag of, just for illustrative purpose, app-apps. So in the browser, this is what's going to be put onto the screen when I load that route. And then Stencil is going to take over, or well, the web component is going to take over, and it's going to render whatever we put inside of here onto the screen. So automatically Stencil creates, automatically Stencil kind of has this built-in method here for us to take a style sheet, a SCSS file, and kind of compartmentalize our styles inside of here. So that way, none of our styles bleed outside of this component. So that way we're, you know, if you've used a framework like Bootstrap or something like that, when you go to add a button or do anything like that, if you do it anywhere inside of your application, or if you use a well class or some kind of class, it's going to apply everywhere. And this allows us to make sure that our styles only apply to that component. And in a future cast, we'll probably cover like Shadow DOM, and that allows you to even more lock down a set of styles so that it doesn't bleed outside of the confines of a component. But this kind of is a great way to start. So again, in CSS, we use these selectors here in order to target an element and then write some styles. But in this case, we're using SCSS. So the great thing about SCSS is it lets us nest rules. So much like here inside of our page, we have an Ion page, and then we have an Ion content. Then inside of there, we have our div with a class of app. In that same way, we can write our styles. So we can say maybe Ion content, and maybe we want to do a padding of 30 pixels. So now when I save that, you'll see that we get nothing. No, it probably already has some padding on it, to be honest. Or it's grumpy and it wants us to use an important. It just doesn't like it. Okay, so in this case, we want to style up our app. So in this case, let's go and do dot app, and then we're going to do our image tag, and let's give it a height of 100 pixels and a width of 100 pixels and a display of block. Booyah. Awesome, now you can see that applied really nicely. And maybe I want to make this a little bit more responsive. So let's go ahead and use an Ion grid here. And again, if you've used Bootstrap before, this should be pretty simple. So maybe I want to do Ion grid, Ion grid. If you've never used their grid system, it's pretty awesome. So we're going to use Ion column to make a column. Yeah, if you've seen me like coding with my mouth hanging open, it's like my focus face. Emily knows it well. It's my focus face. All right, I can say Ion col, Ion col, and then Ion col, and I'll explain this here in 1 second. Okay, so now I went ahead and wrapped the image in a column, as well as the text here in a column. And then what's cool is I can say column dash 4, and then maybe column dash 8. So if you've never used a grid system of any sort, again, this is kind of weird and new to you, but basically what we're doing here is, it's not. Oh, I'm so dumb. Ion row. There we go. Okay, so if you've never used a grid system, this is going to be pretty foreign to you. Let's margin 0 auto. But basically, the general principle of grid systems is this one uses Flexbox. But the general purpose of a grid system is to help you style or help you lay out your page. So we have a grid, so we're telling it we're going to have a grid here. Then we're going to have a row, and a row, again, just like think of it like an Excel spreadsheet, there's a row going across the screen, and then inside of that row there are columns. In this case, we're saying there's a column, and there's a column that's going to span 4, and then there's a column that is going to span 8. So you can tell here that we have a column for our images that's spanning one section, and then we have the text over here that actually spans double the area that the image does. And basically you can think of this screen broken down into 12 equal columns. So across any of these, and you can edit these inside of the settings and stuff like that, so you can edit these, but most grid systems use 12 or 16 columns across the screen. So in this case, there's 12 columns going across. I'm telling it to use 4 of those columns to put this first row in, or the first image in, and then I'm telling it to put the text content with 8 columns. And what's cool is I can even target screen sizes with this. So I could say maybe column 4 on a large screen, I want to use 4. On a large screen, I want to use 8. And what's going to happen is it's automatically going to kind of figure out how much space that we have. And then once we get to that, I might actually have to set x-12. So what I'm going to tell it now is that, hey, on a small screen, I want you to use 12 columns. So I want you to stack on top of each other. Do I have this backwards? I keep getting this backwards. See, this is the point of these casts. You can see me be an idiot. It's great. Okay, there we go. So now you can see I've got a column 12. So by default, this column is going to take up the full width of the available screen. So on a mobile device, you're going to get something that looks like this. But then when we hit this large screen size, which I think is like, I want to say like, oh God, like 1,000 pixels, 1024, something like that. Once you hit that mark, it's going to automatically snap the columns to use the 4x8. So this is a really helpful and handy thing when you're building responsive websites. And if you're not building responsive websites, shame on you. Shame. So again, this is the column system or the grid system in Ionic. Really, really simple. You can pop on over to Ionic Framework and view their docs. That's the great thing is most of the docs are up to date. They work. You can use them with the Stencil components. Some of them don't. Obviously, there's no ng model and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much the gist of how the grid system works. So now we've got this nice grid awesomeness going on. I'm probably going to change it here. Instead of large, let's do like medium. So when the screen's about a medium size, I'll let it use 4 and 8. Welcome anybody who's just joining us. Again, we're building a progressive web app with Stencil, web components, Ionic, and Ionic Core, and JavaScript to replace our current website, MadnessLabs.net. We are in the midst of rewriting our website and thought it'd be really neat to kind of walk people through as we develop and using some of these new tools that are just coming out this year, later part of last year into this year. Because this is going to be super huge, and we're trying to focus a lot more on learning resources, and you can help us focus a lot more on learning resources if you head on over to our Patreon. If you donate $10 or more today, we will actually send you a t-shirt with a nice Madness Labs heart on it. I mean, you know you want that big sexy heart on your shirt. You know you do. And if you donate $50 or more, big spender, we're going to put your name right on the back of it. It ain't no crappy one like the one we got on our Patreon page that I'm wearing from like 5 years ago. It's legit. Emily makes it by hand in her little iron board downstairs. She'll make it for you. She'll do it. I'll make her. No, she'll make me. And then I'll cry all alone. Okay, back to the tutorial. Okay, so now we've got our apps on the screen. Again, this component's getting kind of fat, and you know, I'm no longer fat, and so neither should my components. So we're gonna actually take this component out, and let's make an app component. So that way we can actually take this each one of these rows needs to be its own component. And that way we're not having all this ugliness inside of our apps page. Again, once you get to around 100 lines, I'm at 60, but I've got a lot more stuff I want to do. I need to break this stuff out, and the earlier on that you get in the habit of breaking these things down to the smallest units, the better off you're going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and kill my build process real quick. I'm going to run engine AC for add component, and then I'm going to need to name it something like app. Yeah, let's call it app card. So now I'm going to make an app card for each one of these apps. So let's go ahead, and now you'll see that I have app card, and it's automatically made my component. Thank you, MadnessEnjin. Link description down there. It's down there. Go find it. Okay, so now I want to take out of my apps. I want to go ahead and take my whole thingy-dingy right here. Take this guy, and I want to put it inside of my app card. Boom. And what we're going to do is, you'll see here that we have app icon, app title, and they're all red underlined. So this is where the props are going to come in. So props basically allow us to pass in things or in data as attributes on an element or on a custom web component or custom element. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to load in our new app card. So we're going to say app card, and I'm going to do self-closing because why not? And I'm going to pass in the current app that's being iterated over. I'm going to say app equals app. Awesome. Now inside of our, okay, I'm going to fix this shit. Drive me crazy. I'm sorry I've sinned. Forgive me, Father. Okay, so now you can see that I'm just looping over our data for apps, and I'm going to then spit out an app card component for each one of those. And then inside of our app card component, close this guy out of the way. Inside of our app card component, I'm going to replace app with this.app. So this.app.icon, this.app.title, and this.app.description. And then this prop here, again, props are what I'm passing in right here. So you can see I have an attribute on my app card component called app. And then I'm passing in my curlies app, which remember is just my object. So each one of these objects, as it loops, it's going to put this object, render an app card component with that as the app attribute or prop. And then the next loop, it's going to put this one in, yada, yada, yada. So what I'm going to need to do is come here to the top of my app card component. I'm going to say at porpoise, and I'm going to say app, and it's going to, let's actually use our typings on here, and each app is going to have an icon, which is going to be a string, it's going to have a title, which is going to be a string, and it's going to have a description, which is going to be a string. Okay. So now that I've done that, now you can see that I've cut about 15 lines off of this component. Obviously, it's get a little bit slimmer once I actually start loading in data from an API. Awesome. So now you can see I need to restart my build. NPM Start. Booyah, we're building. Yeah. Okay, let's do apps. Okay, so now we have the exact same result. And now I'm gonna make a little change here just because I wanna see my changes. So I'm gonna use Ionic Core to give these guys a little bit more styling. Gonna make them look real sexy, you know what I'm saying? And then I can get rid of those styles. And it's going to get ugly. It's going to get really ugly again. Ooh, gross. Okay, so now what we're going to do is that same thing. Instead of styling our app via the apps page styles, we're going to take these styles and get them inside our actual component SCSS file. And that way, again, your styles won't bleed outside of this component. Bleed. They won't bleed outside. they won't bleed outside of this component. So now when I put my styles in here, you can see a little cleaner. Now I don't have to target a class or anything like that. It's directly tied to my app card component. And now we've got this really simple unit of work here. Sweetness. Now you can see we've got these nice cards. So we've got our apps all inside of nice little neat cards. Look at that. That's so pretty. So pretty. I like that. I like that a lot. That's good. That's good. I like it. Okay, so now maybe again, this is kind of stupid looking on desktop, right? So maybe I want to throw a set of columns around this so that we have multiple cards on a row. So I'm going to go back into my apps and I'm going to do Ion grid. Ion grid. I'm going to do Ion row. I won't forget you this time, row. Okay, this is where things are going to get interesting. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to put that inside of there. And for each one of these now, I'm going to render an Ion cal. Boosha. Okay, sweet. So now you can see that we have multiple cards and they're kind of automatically sizing themselves as they need to. We could probably make this a little bit better again, like maybe it's a column 12 naturally. Oops. Column 12 naturally, and then maybe column small, we give them half of the screen, and then column medium, we give them a third of the screen, or yeah, third of the screen. Yeah, let's do something like that. Yeah, that's a little bit more reasonable. So now you can see we've got nice responsive looking, except for that last one. Don't pay no attention to that. Just do 6. I don't think we need more than 2 in a row. Awesome. So now you can see we got something that looks fairly good. Again, this is just a quick run, building these components, building a responsive application. So that's pretty sweet. Hello, new viewers. I see you. And we love you. I mean, we got a heart as our logo. I mean, you can tell we love you. Awesome. This is my wife standing creepily in the background. It's like she's just gonna stand there and watch and be like, I don't know what to say. Hello. She's nice. She doesn't bite much. Okay, so now we got our awesome apps page. We've got some app cards on our page. What else can we do? Let's go ahead and show some JavaScripty stuff. Let's do like what should we do? I mean, I've plugged our Patreon like 8 times.
Make the icon spin or something.
Make the icon spin? I mean, I could. All right, by request, we're going to make the icon spin because why the frick not? Okay, so to do that, let's go into our app card. Let's go into our app card.tsx, and we're going to need to do something whenever they're clicked. So maybe when we click, we want this app icon to spin around once. So what we're going to do is let's do we want it on the whole card or just the
icon?
Just the icon. Okay. So let's do an on click. Okay, so events inside of Stencil are just using the regular JavaScript events. So no ng click or anything special or weird. It's just the regular on click that you'd use inside of a regular JavaScript application. So super cool. And then what you're going to do is create a method inside of our class here. So maybe we're going to say spin icon. And then we're going to pass in the event. And then down here, what you're going to do is you're going to pass in an event, because remember, when we click, it passes the event of the click. So that includes like what was clicked on, the XYZ, or the XYZ coordinates, the everything. There's a lot of stuff. And what we're going to do is let's use our TypeScript awesomeness and say UI event, and then we're going to run this dot spin icon. And we're going to pass in the event. Sweetness, right? So now we're going to just console.log, and we're going to console log our event just to make sure it's all working. And let's inspect here. Move this down to the bottom. Okay, hopefully you guys can see this all right. If you have anything you want to comment on, or anything you want to see, or any burning questions you have, like how do I like my Abraham Lincoln beard? I don't know. I don't know what people think about on the interwebs. Okay, so now you can see that when we click on each one of these, we log out the mouse event. So we know that it's hooked up and it is indeed working. So awesome. Points. So now we've got our event logging out. But what we want to do inside of this is whenever we click on this, we want to add a class that's going to do a flip awesome animation, right? So what we're going to do, let's see, how do we want to do it? Let's do a class equals, let's make a new state, and we will say at state. And again, if you don't know what state is just going to be a property that whenever we update it, it will force a render. So we're going to say icon class, and it's going to be a string. Okay, we're going to say this dot string. Oops, no, I'm so dumb. Okay, icon class. There we go. Yeah, you're doing it now. Okay, so now what we can do is let's just say this dot icon class equals spin. Okay, so now let's just inspect our element here. And now you'll see our image doesn't have a class, but the second I click on it, now it gets the spin class. So automatically, because we've updated the value of our state property, that automatically forces a render, and then that render is then going to update the class with this .icon class. So again, if you're new to JavaScript, this is super powerful. It's all the functionality, all the power of a framework without there actually being one at all. So you're not using Angular to do this stuff. You're not you're not data binding and all that stuff. It's just wired up via web components or custom elements, and that's super powerful. So okay, so now when we get our spin class, we want it to go about spinning in a circle. So I could be lazy and get animate.css. Thinking about it. Oh, I don't know if I should or not. Oh, let's do it. Fuck it. No, I'm gonna do it right. Okay, so I'm gonna open up my appcard.scss, and I'm gonna make a and.spin. So one of the first things I'm going to need to do is going to say transition all ease 1 second. Then I'm going to say transform rotate x 360 deg. So if I've done it right, that should give us the result we're looking for. Woo! Pretty awesome, right? Woo! Okay, so the problem is though, is you notice that like once we click it, we can't like click it again. It only spins once. We want it to feel like every time we click it, it just spins in circles like we just shot it in a circus themed game, and now we want it to spin back the other way. So what we're going to do is we're going to say set timeout. So we're going to set a timeout. So our transition here is set for 1 second. So we're transitioning all of the properties. We could actually set this to just be transform if we wanted to, but we're going to say all. So we're transitioning all of them with an ease, which is just a type of animation. It's how the cadence of the animation is going to go. And an ease is kind of like a Bezier curve. It eases in, or it eases to the next stage. Eases. And it's going to do it over the course of 1 second. So what we can do is we can set a timeout here. And I'm going to use my fat arrow again because fat arrow. And we're going to set it for 1,000 milliseconds, which is for all you mathletes out there, a second. And we're going to set the this.icon class back to nothing. So again, what's going to happen is we click on the item. So we click on this guy. It fires the spin icon, and then the icon class gets updated to spin. And then after 1 second, which is enough time for our animation to run, it's going to then set the icon class back to nothing. So that should let us click it over and over. Oh, there's a fun little extra. Woo! It spins back. That's awesome. So that looks pretty cool, right? Awesome. So again, there's just a little kind of quick demo on clicking, doing some kind of an event. And again, all the events that you can think of, they all work in the same manner. So like if you wanted to do on scroll to do something when the page gets scrolled, you can do that. Anything is kind of game. So maybe let's try something a little bit more advanced here. Maybe we want to, whenever we get an app icon to be clicked on, maybe we want something up inside of our app page to get like some kind of an update or some kind of a call. So what we can do is we can use event emitters. So what's really neat is Stencil has actually given us this tool for emitting events and then catching and listening to events. And it's super powerful, and it makes it really easy to kind of communicate up and down between our components. So what we're going to do is let's make a new event. So we will put event and event emitter. We'll include these two guys from Stencil Core. And then what we're going to do is let's make a new event, and we'll say @event. And event, let's just say, I always preface with the actual app name. So I'm going to do like ML icon click. Cool, ML icon click, and it's going to be an event emitter. And it would help if I had my, okay. So we're going to use an event decorator, and then we're going to use ML icon click, and we're going to set it to an event emitter interface. And what, no, don't do that. Okay. So now what we're going to do is down here when we spin our icon, we're going to have it fire this event. So we're going to say this.mliconclick.emit. And then what's neat is you then pass through the data that you want to be forwarded up to the component above it, or any component above it, really. It just fires it. And if you don't, if you're not super familiar with JavaScript and kind of how it works, events bubble up through the actual DOM. So once I fire this event from this icon, that event then bubbles up to the column. Then it bubbles up to the row, and it bubbles up to the grid, and it bubbles up to the card. So it just keeps flowing until it reaches the very top of the document, and then that point it's reached the top and it stops. And that's why if you've ever written an application and you had to do an event.stop propagation, that's what you're stopping. You're stopping that event from going and bubbling up the DOM. You're stopping it, saying, hey, like, stop here. Like when I click on this, stop it right here. So what this is going to do is it's going to fire an event like that. And it's the exact same as doing a document dot Oh God. Yeah, see, I don't even remember the JavaScript. I'm so spoiled by my awesome stencil stuff that I don't even remember my regularness. So what we're going to do now is we're going to emit the event, and I usually would have to do event, but since we're using ES6, automatically if you pass inside of an object, if you pass just event, it's going to create a key value pair of event with whatever I pass into the event variable. So super helpful, makes our life easier, which is what we're all about here at Madness Labs. Okay, sweet. So now I'm emitting that event from inside of my app card component. And now I'm going to go inside of app apps and I'm going to catch that event and then do something. So I'm going to go ahead and in here, I'm going to put listen. So I'm going to import the listen module from Stencil Core and I'm going to listen for that event. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say at listen, and then I say what I'm going to listen to. So I'm going to listen for ML, what was it? Icon click. And I'm going to run icon clicked method here. And I'm going to be passing through the event. So let's just console log the event. So again, just to allow me to recap. We're going to, in our app card, whenever I click on this guy and he spins around, it then fires an event. That event bubbles up the DOM until it hits the app apps page, which is where these guys are loaded into down here, app card. It's going to fire up that until it reaches this. This listener is going to pick up on that event, and then I'm going to console log the event. And you can see I have custom event, and then what you can see is in here there's a details property, and that details includes event, and there's the mouse event. So I've just effectively passed the mouse click for me clicking on this icon directly up to this page. So that event gets emitted from this app card via this event ML click or ML icon click event emitter. I then emit that event whenever something happens inside of my component, and then I catch that event and do something like an icon clicked method that I wrote here. Maybe I want to alert we. And then I can actually listen for that event and then run some kind of functionality. So here I can go boom, we, and it will run. So there is, it is now 6:30. I'm doing this for about an hour and a half. So I think I'm going to kind of wrap it up here. So this was the first Madness cast. Yay, we made it. And again, we hope to do these a little bit more frequently, maybe once, twice a week, to take some time to do these side projects that we've kind of been putting off. Actually, one more thing, always commit your changes. So I'm going to say add apps page, add app card component, play with events, and I'm going to sync. And again, if you want to clone this repo down and follow along at home, there is a repo out, Madness Labs /Madness Labs PWA on GitHub. I don't think I have a link in the description to our GitHub, but I probably should. So yeah, so it's up there. All these changes are up there. And again, as we make these casts, we'll keep updating everything, and we'll keep you guys in sync with what's going on. We've been working today on replacing the Madness Labs website. We'll try to pick it up and make a little bit more speed on the next one. Did a lot of explaining on some basic stuff. Hopefully that's helpful to some beginners out there. And for your non-beginners, it's going to get more in-depth as we kind of go on with these casts. So yeah, there was the first cast. Thanks for joining us, guys. Thanks for playing along at home. And again, we have a Patreon. There's a link. Use the link right there. You should click. Other way. Okay. So link in the description, and if you don't click it, I'm going to murder this L on our next cast. I won't. He'd find me out and murder me before I got a chance, but it's a threat. So yeah, thanks for joining us, guys. If you have any questions, please add us on Twitter at Madness Labs. Come to our website, join our casts, get on YouTube, subscribe, do other stuff, action items, action, call to action. No, just if you guys donate today to Patreon, you donate $10, you will get a T-shirt with a Madness Labs logo right on your heart, so to let everyone know how much you love us and we love you right back. So, and if you donate $50, we'll even slap your name on the back. You know, she'll be down there doing it, and I'll watch and be amazed at her designing skills. So yeah, and then as always, thanks for watching, and we'll have more tutorials and shorter stuff coming up in the next week or so. And until next Madness Cast, guys.
Thank you.
Peace. Dance. Now dance. Dance.